Good morning, everyone, and welcome to another weekend workshop today. Today, we're talking about grant writing, a very important topic. My name is Carrie Ramsey, and I'm the project manager for the Weekend Project, which is led by Queen's University and funded by FedDev Ontario through the Women Entrepreneurship Strategy Ecosystem Fund. So if you have been a part of the more than 50 virtual workshops that we have held so far in the past year, welcome back. For those of you who are brand new, welcome. We're so excited that you've joined us for this important topic. And why don't we take just a moment now in the chat to go ahead. Let us know where you're connecting from. Where are you from in the world? What is your business? If you want to put a link to your business or your LinkedIn profile, a social media profile, whatever you'd like, just put a little quick note into the Zoom chat. We love for these to be networking opportunities as well as learning opportunities. So welcome today. I'm connecting from the Bay of Quinte region, and it's so great to have you with us. Without further ado, we're going to jump into this topic today. You know that usually I do a land acknowledgement, but Nancy is going to do that for us today during her presentation. So I am super excited to hand over the microphone to Nancy to get into this important topic. And just before she does, Nancy, I don't know if you know this, but this is National Be a Millionaire Day. Did you know that?
I'm always I'm going to win a lottery. I'm good with that.
Well, I think it's very appropriate for grant writing because frankly, you never know how much money you might be able to access through grants. So I think it's very appropriate that today is National Be a Millionaire Day. At the very least, let's hope for maybe a few thousand. Do you think we can move the dial for some of these individuals today? Let's hope that we can tap into some of the money that's out there. So I'm going to hand the virtual microphone over to Nancy. Welcome. It is such a pleasure. Nancy is from Queen's University as well. She'll give us perhaps a little bit of her background. Suffice to say, she has a lot of experience in this area and we're excited to have her. So welcome, Nancy. Welcome, everyone. It's so wonderful to have you.
Great. Thank you, Carrie, for that introduction. Hello to everybody. What a wonderful group of people. And those of you that have profile pictures on your Zoom, they're great. I love them. Mine was, if you came in early, you might have seen it. It was actually taken in Barcelona a couple of years ago. And boy, do I look forward to being able to travel again. Let's get started. Let's not waste any time. We have an hour, and what I'm going to try to do is talk for about 40 minutes, if I can hold my enthusiasm back, and then leave about 20 minutes for questions, and also give you an opportunity to follow up with me by email or through LinkedIn if you have any questions that are of a more specific nature that we don't have time to get to today. So I'll start. Let me just move my slide here. If you would join me in acknowledging the Indigenous peoples of all the lands that we're on today. I myself am in downtown Kingston, Ontario at the moment, but I know that we've got people here from all over, which is wonderful. So while we meet today on a virtual platform, I'd like to take a moment to acknowledge the importance of the lands that we all call home. We do this to reaffirm our commitment and responsibility in improving relationships between nations and to improve our own understanding of local Indigenous peoples and their cultures. So from coast to coast to coast and beyond, we acknowledge the ancestral and unceded territory of all the Inuit, Métis, and First Nations people that call this land home. And we consider how we can each in our own way try to move forward in a spirit of reconciliation and collaboration. So let me just start by telling you a little bit about myself. So I will just move this slide on one more. Two things I'll mention at the outset. The first is that I've used Zoom and other platforms for a whole lot of meetings in the last year, but this is the first time that I've actually presented a workshop. So if you'll bear with me if I have any technical challenges or if I'm a little bit confused or not looking at the camera all the time. And the other thing is that it's allergy season here in Kingston, so I apologize in advance if I sneeze. I took a Claritin, but we'll see how it goes. To introduce myself, I'm Nancy Churchman. My pronouns are she and her. My background in education is that I did my undergraduate degree at Carleton University in Ottawa, and I did my graduate work in economics at the University of Toronto. I've had lots of experience in a lot of different contexts with grant writing and proposal writing, in an academic context, in a nonprofit context, in the context of entrepreneurial type applications. So I've got a lot of experience in the area of grant writing. And my current position is as the research manager in the School of Computing at Queen's University. So I've had the opportunity to work well beyond my specialty area of economics and to learn more about science and engineering and computing, which has been really exciting. And that's my background. And I thought I'd start out with the quote that's on this slide to introduce to you the concept of being a storyteller in your grant writing. So this particular Kenyan entrepreneur guides herself each day by 3 questions. What are you fixing? What are you making? And who are you helping? And a lot of you probably have a similar set of questions that you help guide your decision making as an entrepreneur or a business owner. And in writing grants, it's really important to think about telling your story. And grant reviewers are human beings, and they're going to gravitate towards stories that are readable, that are interesting, and that are a good fit with what they're looking to fund. The other thing that I wanted to point out is I've talked about my academic background, but I really don't think you need academic or formal training in order to be a good storyteller. So, for example, my father, I was a late in life baby. So he was born in 1918. He grew up in the Depression. If he graduated grade 8, that might have been as much as he did. And yet he was one of the best storytellers I've ever met. And I think that came from just his life experiences, just being interested in people, having conversations. He read a lot, and I'm not saying he read highfalutin stuff about how to write grants. He just read stories. He read Westerns. He listened to good old country and Western music, and all of those songs are really stories. So he understood sort of instinctively through that experience the idea of telling a story and engaging people's interests. So I just wanted to say that it doesn't really matter what your background is. You can really tell a good story, especially if it's authentic to who you are and who you're trying to serve. So the next slide talks about the fact that every applicant is unique. So we've got a lot of people here from a lot of different backgrounds. Some of you have a lot of experience in writing. Some of you have barely put pen to paper or hand to keyboard, as it were. Some of you are first-time applicants or are going to be first-time applicants. Some of you have a lot of experience at writing proposals. And you may be someone who has a network of established colleagues and contacts, or you may just be starting out in your business and you're really interested in a general overview. But everyone in preparing proposals and seeking funding faces some common challenges. And in the survey that I asked people to fill out, and thank you to those who were able to complete it, I learned that most of, like a small majority of you have little or no experience with grant writing, so you're really starting out fresh. And so what I'm aiming to do here is to really give you kind of a general introduction about what to think about and leave time at the end for some Q&A. And also, if you have ideas for specific issues in grant writing that you're interested in hearing about, you could always email Carrie afterwards and say, I really would love to see a session that's focused on this specific aspect of grant writing, or a session for much more experienced grant writers. And I'm not saying I'll be the person to offer that session, but I'm sure she's got a good network of contacts who can provide that kind of information. You can see that I still work with paper. So I'm not fully electronic yet. It's a symptom of my age. So I structured this in terms of 7 tips to try to keep it to a manageable length. But really, there's a lot more that I could say. I could, go on and on for days about all of the advice about what to do and what not to do. But I tried to focus on the basic elements, and I hope that they'll be of help to you, at least in structuring your thinking about grant writing. So tip number 7 is follow the rules. And I think that for some of you, you're used to being rule breakers, and I appreciate that. I mean, if you're an entrepreneur, you're already probably used to creating your own rules. And I have a lot of respect for that. But in terms of preparing grant proposals, it's really critical to follow rules. So I suggest that you read and reread and refer to instructions, guidance that the funder that you're looking to apply to provides. And often, if you look at that information carefully enough, you'll find answers to questions that you may have about the program. So, am I eligible? Am I a good candidate? How much money should I be asking for? Sometimes, if you drill down deep enough into the guidelines, you can find answers to that. The other thing that's important in terms of following the rules is really to give the funder what they're asking for. So I've said here on the slide that you want to use the headers that they suggest, or you want to respect any page limits that they give you. If they're saying provide 1 page, don't provide 2. If they want you to use a particular font, if they want you to use a specific margin on a piece of paper, just do it. And also make note of any specific rules, even if they seem kind of minor or arbitrary, because the funders, sometimes they get so many applications that they're looking for excuses to winnow the pool. And it's easy for them to do that if you haven't followed the rules. If they say, oh, this person has provided 3 pages and we only want 1, well, it's not really fair to review it, out it goes. So rules are important. I think the other thing about rules that's important is that you try to mimic their language. So in their requests for proposals, or in their proposal forms, or in the guidelines, they'll use certain words, they'll use certain language, and it's really helpful for you to use that language back to them. So for example, a funder might say, talk about the impact of your work. Make sure that you state, use the word impact there a couple of times in a couple of different contexts, so that they know, okay, if they're skimming through it, they know that's where I go to look for the answer to that kind of question. The other thing that's helpful is if they have mission statements or vision statements, look at that and mirror some of that language back to them. So don't just parrot it back, but use some of the kinds of language that they use. So try to fit into what it is that they're looking for in an ideal applicant. So I could say more about this, and I probably will later, but I'll leave it at that for this tip for now, in the interest of time. So tip number 6 is really to spell things out. So I find this a lot with academic applicants, because they're often experts in a field. And so they forget what it was like to be someone who wasn't an expert in a field. So for you, if you're a very experienced entrepreneur, you may fall into this trap as well. And what you want to do is you want to make sure to make what you say comprehensive to an average reader. Sometimes funding agencies or funders or foundations will tell you the kinds of people that are going to read your application. So you'll have a sense of whether they're an expert in your particular area. But in general, assume that you're writing, assume that you're sort of having a conversation with someone who doesn't know a lot about the specifics of what you do. So if you're not sure that they would understand that you have a particular level of experience, say it within the guidelines of the amount of space that you have. More generally, I say, when in doubt, spell it out. So don't assume that the person reading your proposal will know the details of what you're saying. So that's why I've included this quote from Isaac Asimov saying, scrub your assumptions off every once in a while or the light won't come in. And this is where it can be helpful for you to have someone read your document that isn't really familiar with what you do. Give it to your uncle or your cousin and ask them to read it and say, is there anything I've left out that you think that I should include here? So let's go to tip number 5. And this sort of follows on from tip number 6. And this is to be clear and concise. So a lot of people fall into the trap of using jargon, using acronyms, using technical terms that are specific to their particular work. And it's really important to avoid those where you can. Sometimes there are acronyms that everyone knows, like, NATO. You don't have to spell that out, but most people know what that means. But in general, you want to keep things as accessible as possible. The other thing to do is to really try to use the simplest explanations or the simplest elements of story possible that capture your ideas. Again, thinking in terms of someone reading this proposal who isn't an expert, who's someone who may have a general knowledge but really isn't expert. The other thing that you can do, and this comes into play really when you're writing, when you have some experience at writing proposals, is think about analogies, think about good examples, think about diagrams or charts or tables that can present the information that you want to present in the simplest way possible. So, as you go on in your work, think about how your competitors describe what they do. Look at other entrepreneurs and look at the kinds of examples that they provide when they're talking about what it is that they produce or the service that they provide, and kind of, borrow from others. And as you go along, you'll probably find that your own experience in your business will give you good examples. Sometimes a client can talk to you about the service you provide in a way that you never really thought about describing it before. So make note of that. If a client says, I really think that what you do is, and they say something that really resonates with you or that you think describes your work in a good way, jot it down. Ask them if you can use it. Ask them if you can quote them. It's helpful to keep that kind of thinking in mind as you go along. The other thing to do is often proposals they have page limits, they have character limits. You're supposed to put things in a text box and it only allows a certain number of words. So try to avoid repetition. You want to make it look as though you've got a lot to say and you're really struggling to put it into this small amount of space. So you don't want to repeat things. If there are things that are important, sometimes it's helpful to say them a couple of times just to really emphasize them, but try saying them in different ways. Don't use the exact same language. Don't cut and paste from one section to another, but maybe express it in slightly different ways. So you can either use different terminology, you can use different words, you can use different examples, but really try not to waste the space that you're given by simply repeating the same thing. Frank Lloyd Wright said the lack of clarity is the #1 time waster. And so I think that is true for people who have to read a whole lot of grant applications. They want to see things clear, presented clearly, presented simply. So moving on to tip number 4, asking for advice. And I bet because all of you are here, you're probably pretty good at asking for advice. I find, at the risk of being sexist, I think women are better at asking for advice than men are. So I think you're probably in a good space to take this advice very seriously. And there are so many different helpful resources. I could go on for days about this. So I've written down some of them on the slides. Sample proposals. Maybe you know someone or you have someone in your network who has applied for a kind of funding in the past and they're willing to share their sample proposal with you. That's great. You can reach out to them. You can say to them, I will keep it completely confidential. I will not share it with anyone else. I will not copy it. Reassure them that you just want to really see what the funder is looking for. Sometimes funders will put summaries of proposals or work that they've funded on their websites. Have a look at that. Sometimes you may have supervisors, you may have colleagues, you may have relatives even who have advice because they've written proposals in the past, friends and family. And the thing is, I'm sure you all know, is if people do help you with your proposal, if they read it, give you advice, even helpful or not, say thanks, keep them updated on how things are going, because you never know how that network and how that person, knowing that you're interested in funding, how that will play out in the future. You never know who knows someone who's got connections to a funder who might bring some ideas your way or alert you to some opportunities. Let me see, I've got a few notes about this. Another place that's good for advice that sometimes I find people don't think about is sometimes if you're really stuck, librarians are looking for ways to help people with things like this. So, your local public library, if you're saying, I really don't know how to answer this kind of question, try your local public library. There may be a librarian that's willing to do some research for you and try to provide you with some advice, or maybe some article on the internet that might help with that. So I think people don't think about that too much, but librarians, they're there to do that kind of thing. And if they get enthused about your work, they may continue to provide you with information. The other thing I would say here is certainly be open to constructive criticism and be ready to learn from mistakes, but do not believe that all criticism is constructive. So some people are just negative by nature. Some people have a really strong feeling that you should express something in a certain way. So take the advice, make of it what you will, but if you reject it at the end of the day, it's your business, it's your future, you're the ultimate decision maker. And who would know that better than Hillary Clinton, who said, take criticism seriously, but don't take it personally. Let it roll right off of you if it's something that you can't use. You'll probably also learn over time that certain people, you might love them, but you don't want to go to them for advice because they automatically start picking your ideas apart. So, be careful in who you ask for help. So going on to tip number 3, and this is a personal one. And this is something that I bet because you're a lot of entrepreneurs or would-be entrepreneurs, you're go-getters, go, and you're busy, but it's really important to take breaks, especially when you're writing. It's something that I didn't really learn myself until I got a bit older. When I was younger, I would just sort of try to plow through things, but it really helps to take some space and some time, because what it can do is it can let you minimize being sloppy in your proposal. It lets you catch typos. It lets you gain perspective and think things over. And like, for example, I'll give you a personal example, not to do with grant writing, but I like the New York Times crosswords. So I have the app on my phone, and I used to just sort of plow through them. And what I've found over time is that I work on them, and then I hit a wall where it's like there's a certain part of the puzzle I'm just not getting at. And what I do is I leave it and I go back to it in half a day or a day. And I haven't thought about it in the intervening time. And I haven't looked anything up in the intervening time, but just taking my mind off of it and coming back to it gives me fresh perspective. So good old Benjamin Franklin said, never confuse motion with action. So sometimes, if time permits, the best thing for you to do at a particular moment is to take a break. Let me go on to tip number 2, and I'm just checking my time. So I think I'm pretty on track. I don't know how many of you have watched The Big Bang Theory, but if you have, Dr. Sheldon Cooper is pretty full of himself. And so this is a typical thing he would say, yes, that's what I think, and I'm super smart, so it's probably true. What I'm trying to say here is you want to aim for a balance, and you want what you propose to be achievable, given the time that's allocated, the amount of money they're willing to fund for you, the resources you have, given the circumstances of the economy. So obviously in a pandemic economy, you may not be able to achieve things as quickly as in a non-pandemic economy, which is hopefully what we'll be in soon. So you want to be realistic, but you also want to be sure to emphasize what's new or unique about the product you offer or the services you offer. If anything, I have noticed that women tend to underplay and men tend to overplay. This is changing, but I still find that in giving this advice to men, I tend to emphasize the achievable part, and giving this advice to women, I have to emphasize the novel or unique part. So aim for being enthused, aim for being, for talking about the impact or the positive nature of your work. Use positive language. Maybe don't say, I hope to, say, I will. Be a bit more positive, and I think that will come across, but you still have to have that element of realism. It's a balancing act. So best tip I can give, and this is probably something that you've learned in your work, is to be deadline driven. So if you are seeking funding support, whatever the kind, learn of, know, track, and remind yourself of all relevant deadlines. And this is something you'll probably get better at over time if you apply to more and more programs. Also, don't wait for the mood to strike you to write a draft. Just get ideas down on paper, however imperfect they are. It is so much easier to write something down and then to go back later and edit it and improve it and slash things out of it and add things to it than it is to face a blank page. So as General Patton said, and he had some success, he said, a good plan today is better than a perfect plan tomorrow. So don't think that you have to sit down and write the perfect proposal. Really just get ideas down on paper. I think that's really key. And then you can work from there. Let's see. Oh yeah, I was trying to think of an example from my life, and it's not to do with proposal writing, but it is to do with writing. So when I was doing my PhD, I had my thesis supervisor was a leading light in his field, and he had been supervised by the best people, and he could be very intimidating. He was a very intellectual guy. He looked like he had the hair like Einstein, like he had that academic look, and he could be intimidating. And so I was working on things, and I produced a paper, an article, and I sent it off to a journal. And the journal sent it back to me, and they said, this is good, we'll publish it, we just need you to make these few changes. So I went to him and I'm like, they've accepted it, I just have to make these few changes. And he's like, I didn't think it was ready to be sent off. He was surprised that I had sent it off. And so it got me a published paper, my first published paper, and it convinced him, because he was looking at my work as someone who was kind of in rarefied air. And it convinced him, oh, actually, yes, she can produce papers that can be published. So, don't wait for the mood to strike. Don't think it has to be perfect. Submit a proposal. If you don't get funded, Maybe they'll send you advice about how to get funded next time. Maybe you can phone someone up and say, what about my proposal really didn't work? Or what do I need to do to be successful next time? Really, really keep trying. Don't necessarily think that things have to be perfect. You never know. So few additional pieces of advice that don't really fall into tips, but that I thought were important to say. And one is to keep updated about funding opportunities for women entrepreneurs. And these can really sometimes come out of left field and can be very specialized. So there might be opportunities that are only specific to your particular sector of funding or your particular area, like a geographic area, or your particular stage in entrepreneurship. Maybe you're starting out and there may be funding for someone who's just starting out. So you probably know a lot of this, but there's lots of ways to keep informed. So networking is really key. Connecting with industry groups through memberships in industry groups and through things like LinkedIn. I'm not a Facebook person, but maybe there's opportunities on Facebook as well. Through websites, through listservs, through e-newsletters, sign up for them, set up some kind of rules so they get sent to a folder so you don't have to deal with them in your day-to-day life, but you can go and check them out every couple of weeks and see if there's any new funding opportunities that come up. There can be research funding listings and databases, and you can often find these through Google. There can be funder websites, e-newsletters, Twitter feeds, conferences, networking events. There's all kinds of sources of potential information. It can be a bit overwhelming, but you'll probably get a sense of which of these work best for you. And so you can sort of find your way towards sources of information. Another set of ideas I had thinking about this was when there's a new municipal or provincial or federal budget, sometimes have a look at a summary of the budget, because sometimes they'll mention new programs to support entrepreneurs. So you might see that in the federal budget, the federal government is putting aside X amount of money to support small and medium-sized enterprises run by women. Have a look at that, make a note in your calendar, because eventually that may translate into a real program that you can apply to. So that can give you a bit of a heads up about what kind of funding may be coming down the pipe. Another idea might be to call up your local MP or MPP's office and say, hey, I'm a young woman entrepreneur. Are there any programs that you know of that I might be able to apply to for support or funding? That might be a good opportunity. It's also a good opportunity to network with your MP or MPP. And also, in some cases, you might want to touch base with your local college or university. They have industry partnerships offices. Usually they may be called different things, but often they're called industry liaison or industry partner. You may want to call them up and say, do you have any opportunities for one of your students to help me with this kind of work, or to have an internship with me? Because they're often looking for projects that students can work on. And sometimes you may get lucky. They may say, well, there's actually this funding program and we're looking for a partner who's in the private sector to work with a student or a researcher on this, and there's some funding involved. So that might be a good place to network. Let's see next. The other thing I would suggest is be ready to act on short notice, because sometimes opportunities come up with a very tight deadline, or you just hear about them late. I mean, it's possible. I suggest starting, if you don't already, have a bit of a portfolio, and this can be a paper file, or it can be a file on your computer with application friendly information. So you keep your latest business plan there. You keep your statistics, your sales figures, information about your competitors, information about your market. You can keep blurbs from your promotional material that describe what you do to your customers. Maybe you've been featured in a local newspaper article or in a local blog by someone, or you've been reviewed, or your product has been reviewed. Keep that information there, because you never know when it might come in handy. I'm also seeing more competitions in academia that involve video. And so I think that there may be more video competitions for entrepreneurs coming down the pipe. I think we may move towards that and so you want to keep visual material about your work. So if you're going out and working with a client and you're filming it so that you have an example of the kinds of things you do, keep that in a file. There might be video content if you're featured on local media. The other thing to keep in mind is that often local media is looking for stories. So if you don't have any coverage in local media, and you've got an idea, you say, oh, you know, my product really helped this client, this local client. Call up your local media or send them an email and say, I've got a story. I think it would be really good visually. I think you might want to cover it. You never know, you might get coverage. The other thing is with visual material, if you're just not savvy, like I am not savvy about photography or filming, often local high schools or colleges might have students who are looking for a project that they can do as part of their work for credit, or they just want to get some experience on their resume. So you could always call them up and say, do you have a student who's really interested in doing some photography and would like to take some photographs of me doing my work, and maybe we could incorporate it on a website? Give them a try. You might get some free help, and you might be able to help someone else in the process. Another point here is to keep informed about issues and topics that are of interest to funders. So if there's a particular funder that you're targeting, let's say it's an Ontario government program, for example, look at the Ontario government website from time to time, look at their budget documents, look at their strategic plans, especially if they have a strategic plan that's in your area of work. So you're working in tech and they have a tech strategic plan for the province. Have a look at that. Look at what they're focusing on. Again, you get some interesting language that you can use in proposals, but you also have a sense of what it is that they might be funding now or funding in the future. EDII, equity, diversity, inclusion, and indigeneity is obviously of increasing interest. So if there are reports and statements about those, keep abreast of the latest language and the latest target audiences. There's more and more interesting goals around sustainability. So if you're working in something that's green or eco-friendly, there's often specialized funding opportunities in that area. And then for those of you who are more experienced, I did have one person asking in the survey about the NSERC Alliance program. Keep informed about programs that involve public-private collaborations or collaborations between companies and colleges or universities, because there can be lots of funding opportunities in that area. In Ontario, especially for colleges, there are a lot of new funding opportunities where colleges are looking for partners in the private sector. So it's worth looking into that if you think that you've got some kind of business or service that might benefit from working with a college student. Another person, just because someone brought this up in the survey that I sent, looking for funding to support accessibility. So I believe it was maybe making websites more accessible. You might want to touch base with accessibility organizations or offices, again, at colleges, because they may have students who are looking for projects in this area. So they may have a student who wants to learn about accessibility and AODA compliance on websites, and they may be able to make your website accessible for you at little or no cost. So that's another area. And that's really where I want to leave it, and move to questions. What I wanted to say is that there are really good resources out there. So just preparing for this talk, I went and looked at the Cartier Women's Initiative, which I'm sure some of you are familiar with. And this is a program that provides funding to women entrepreneurs, but they have a lot of supportive material on their website that looks very helpful. They have, for example, a worksheet that asks a lot of questions about the businesses of applicants. And these are really good questions to get you thinking about what you can say about your business or your product or your services. So there's tons of resources out there, and there's lots of opportunities to get additional information or to get additional training, again, at no cost. A lot of it is free out there. And obviously from organizations such as We Can, who provide such valuable assistance with all of these topics. So I think I'll leave it there. And Carrie, did you want to open it up to questions?
Yes, so why don't you go ahead and make a note in the chat if you would like to ask a question. That way I can call on you and it's a little bit more organized. I know that Marina had put a question, she actually sent a question to me about specific grants for women entrepreneurs. I don't know, Marina, if your question has been answered, so I'll ask you that first. I'll call on you.
No, I don't believe my question was answered. I was just wondering if there's any specific grants or funders that you would recommend to apply for, specifically for female entrepreneurs, or even if there's resources that we can find grants that are most applicable to us.
Have you, can I ask where you are, what province you're in, or what region?
Yep, I'm in Toronto, in Ontario.
In Toronto, so there's probably going to be a lot of options there. I suggest starting with a Google search, because when I do a Google search, I come up with an Ontario government page that provides a lot of information about general opportunities for entrepreneurs, specifically women entrepreneurs. It would really, I can't give a general answer because it really depends upon your particular geographic area, your particular industry, and whether you're providing a product or a service and your level of experience. But that's something that if you wanted to reach out to me, and I've got my contact info up on this slide, I'd be happy to point you in. If you give me a little bit of a blurb about what you do, I can try pointing you in the proper direction. And that goes for everybody.
That would be great. Thank you so much.
Yeah, no problem. I mean, if you do get in touch with me, I do have a day job, so it might take me a while to get back to you, but trust me, I will get back to you. I'm very reliable. It just may not be right away.
That's fine. Thank you so much.
Marina, I'll just pop in as well that I had put in the chat that we put out a weekly e-bulletin from the We Can project. And one of the purposes of that weekly e-bulletin is to connect women entrepreneurs with funding opportunities. And so any funding opportunities that are available for women in the province of Ontario, I become aware of, and I put them directly into that newsletter every week. So just maybe to save Nancy even the time of doing an individual search, that's exactly the purpose of that e-bulletin. Now it also talks about workshops, events coming up, but we have, I can't even count the number of women who have accessed thousands of dollars since like over the past year. And it's not that I've completed the grant for them. It's just that we've like, here is some funding. And to Nancy's point, very often with the COVID funding, it comes up, yes, I saw someone say, is it suitable for Ottawa? Yes, so many of these are Ontario or even Canada-wide grants. So sorry to our American and international followers, I'm being more specific regionally here, but check with your own local economic development office on these. So for instance, the RE3 funding was specifically for women entrepreneurs. It was over 5 months that it was available, and we had dozens and dozens of women get up to $5,000 in our community. Well, $5,000 is huge for a woman entrepreneur in many cases. It actually can, it's a survival mechanism in some cases for some of them during that tough time. So I'll put my email again into the chat, folks, and anyone who is in the Ontario region, I'm putting it in there now, and you would like to get on that weekly e-newsletter list. If I know of any, I put it there, and people in the chat can attest to the fact that probably some on this call have received grants that way. I don't give out the money, though, I want to be clear. All right. So yes, of course. Stacy, you had a question. Go ahead, please.
Thank you very much, Carrie. Nancy, thank you for your presentation. It was very enlightening, and I learned a great deal. I'm curious, Nancy. This is all very brand new. So first off is when researching where these grants are available within, for funding purposes, other than the Ontario part, there's also federal as well. And can, provincial monies be used in federal jurisdiction, and can federal funds be used in provincial jurisdiction? So that was one question. But another one I had that was kind of related to that is, where do you get the application?
Okay. So in terms of federal and provincial money, I mean, what you'll find is that each program will have its own guidelines. But in general, it's hard to say in general, but I don't think there's any problem with applying to both. If say you're in Ontario, applying to Ontario programs and federal programs, there shouldn't be any problem as long as they don't have any specific guidelines that say that if you've received provincial funding in the last X period, maybe you're not eligible for federal funding. But in general, I don't think it's an issue. And usually the proposals themselves are on the internet, and they're often submitted electronically. So it would be on the particular funder's website. And I bet, Carrie, in your newsletter, you would link to those proposals and then link to the page where they would apply.
Yeah, Stacy, absolutely. Get in touch with me, and we can, if that's something we want to spend some time on, absolutely. Yeah, but to her point, especially with COVID right now, everything is being done virtually. So that's just our reality.
Which is fine if you're tech savvy. And
I know it adds another layer of challenge. And
oh my God, it's so
right.
complicated.
Well, you know what? You get in touch with me, Stacy. Stacy's one of our clients, for anyone else who's wondering. And so you do that, and I will, I'm there to assist you for sure.
Thank you. So the other part of that question, Nancy, was where do you get the applications? Are they actually on the person who's offering the funding?
Yeah, they would tend to be on their websites.
Okay.
Yeah, so, sometimes they'll have you fill out a form online. They'll have text boxes, and you'll type in the individual answers. And sometimes they'll just have you print off a page and fill it out on your computer and then upload the page. It really depends on the funder.
Okay.
Yeah.
One last quick question. So once we get to that point of actually having an application and stuff, can we knock on your door to have a proof on it?
That's a whole other business, Nancy. Are you in that business?
That's actually a business that I've done in the past. So given the number of people on the call, I would probably have to regretfully say no. If it's, a 1 or 2 people, I'm happy to do it, but I can't do it for a lot of people. But maybe a one-time only special for you, Stacy. I'd be happy to make one for you.
Thank you, Nancy.
And once you use up that free card, Stacy, you can send it to me. I'm also happy to.
There you go.
Okay, thanks, Carrie. Okay,
Donna
thank you for answering my questions.
Great questions and really good point about the technological adaptability that is required now just to access these programs. It's a really great point. Donna had asked a question in the chat. are grants available for nonprofit, or sorry, for for-profits.
Oh, yeah.
And so if that wasn't clear, maybe you want to spell that out.
Oh, sure. Yeah. I mean, it depends on the program. There are certainly grants out there for all different kinds of businesses. So yeah, there are definitely grants for for-profit businesses. Yeah.
Great. And Denise has a good question as well. It just scrolled up, so I lost it. But she was asking, are there any websites you can suggest, Nancy, that have templates for proposals, for instance? Can you think of any of those?
It's tough because every proposal is going to have its own requirements. Ideally, yes, there would be one template, but I did mention the Cartier Women's Initiative, and they have, I think they call it a worksheet, and it's a pretty comprehensive set of questions that would probably cover a lot of the questions that you would be asked. So it might be a good place to start to think about the kinds of information that you might be asked.
Great. And I just put the link to that in the chat. And if anybody's struggling with seeing things in the chat, then let me know after through my email, and I can maybe get you some of these links. Or you can watch or you can Google it, or you can watch the recording again. It's up to you. So I'm sorry if I missed. I don't see anybody who put their hand up. So if you now want to again put, oh yeah, no, we have Stacy's, we have Donna's. I think we've covered. Oh, go ahead, Martina. Martina, do you want to voice that question?
Sure. Hi. I almost forgot my question.
I'll read it to you, Martina.
Oh,
and then you can fill in any blanks. Are there any resources as well, other than what you previously mentioned? If so, can you send the link? As well, in your experience, what types of entrepreneurs had the most success in obtaining a grant? Did you want to add to that, or?
Oh, sorry.
Actually, no, it's good. It's good.
That's good. Resources, there's just so many. But again, if you want to get in touch with me and my contact information, I can,
Sure.
And give me a little bit of a blurb about where you are, what your business is, what your level of experience is. Maybe I'll have a look and I'll send you a few sources that I think might be helpful for you in your specific situation.
Excellent.
And in terms of success, I think it really is kind of across the board. I don't think that there's a pattern that I'm aware of, except to say that the opportunities for women and members of underrepresented groups have definitely been increasing in recent years. There's much more of an awareness of needing to spread these resources more equitably.
That's really nice that's actually being, handled, and awareness is key, right? So that's excellent. It's perfect.
Awareness, and I give a lot of credit to advocacy. I think
Yes.
there have been women and people of color and allies who have really advocated for groups that have traditionally been underrepresented. And and we also have to give a shout out to our customers, because a lot of our customers are seeking us out because we're local or because we provide a different approach.
Good point.
And it looks good for our country too. It's very diverse and respectable. So that's very commendable. Yeah.
No, I agree. I'm happy to see things going in this direction.
Yes.
The way it should be, recognizing
That's
human
right.
beings as equal.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So yes. Excellent.
Awesome.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. And for the resources that you've mentioned in the chat, like this is a mind-blowing webinar. It's more than what I asked for. So thank you.
Awesome.
Oh, thank you.
So happy to hear it. Nancy's awesome. She's a rock star.
Yes,
She's a rock
thanks,
star.
Nancy. Thank you.
That's me. I'm awesome. What can
Yes.
I say?
Own it. Own your awesome. That's awesome. Can I just quickly, we have 5 minutes left, but I just want to mention a quick story to your point, going back to Nancy. You talked about don't give up. I had a weekend client who I had sent a link to. I said, and often I'll do this with our clients, I'll say, this is a great grant for you. It sounds like you. And it was a couple of women leading it. And they said, you know what, we just got turned down for a grant last week. We're so deflated. We're
Yep.
so demoralized. We just don't have the energy to fill out another one of these, Carrie. And I said, do it. And they got $5,000 within a couple of weeks. It was a quick turnaround. They came back and they said, we will not ever let that stop. One rejection is not going to stop us from applying again and again, because you don't know, you might be one application away from turning your business around. So do not give up just because you've been rejected before. Seek out, wisdom and support to maybe refine your grant applications. But honestly, maybe that was just the wrong application. So just keep that in mind and do not give up. Nada had the final question. I think we'll give to Nada, sorry, unless we can fit in one more. She's in Calgary. She's a newcomer to Canada. She's wondering what types of documents she might have to produce to apply for some Alberta grants, I suppose, or even Canadian. And I think that just might have to do with permanent residency. But Nancy, do you have a thought on that? I don't know the specific grant.
Again, it would depend upon the specific granting opportunity. So you'd really have to look at the guidelines, but there may be specific programs for newcomers to Canada. So I would not discount Googling, looking, maybe calling up your MP or your MPP and saying, I'm new to the country, but I have this really great business idea, and are there funding opportunities for me? I can't really be specific because it would really depend upon the specific program.
I agree. And I'll echo to add that check out your local economic development office.
That too, yeah.
Those are called different things in different cities, whether you're Canadian, American, but even across Canada. Sometimes they're called small business centers. In the Quinte area, it's Trenval, right? In Kingston, it's the Kingston Economic Development Office. So you want to make sure that you're a part of, maybe you're following their newsletter as well. Now at Weekend, they happen to be one of our partners. So, we just talked about the Kingston pandemic funding recently, which there was a window of opportunity. Anyone in Kingston whose business was suffering, there was a lot of money there. And so again, that we would have funneled that to our clients, of course. But, keep in touch with your local small business centers, and don't be isolated. Don't be an island, and don't just trust Google, because that's not regional. And a lot of the money right now, it's buy local, support local. That's why the money is coming from the local regions in many cases. So definitely connect to your local women's organization, perhaps. And if I can help you find that, I'll try, depending on where you are. So yeah, that's great. I don't know. I didn't see any other questions in the chat. Nancy, there's just so much gratitude for what you've shared. That's for sure. Everyone, I'm going to put my email one more time into the chat for two purposes. One is, of course, that today's workshop is being recorded. So if you would like a copy of the genius that is Nancy Churchman, you want to get a hold of this recording and pass it on to your friends, right? There's other people that perhaps couldn't make it today that you know of who could benefit from this. And that's why we record these. Secondly, if you'd like to be on our e-bulletin list, trust me, I don't get paid for any more people that are on my e-bulletin list. I'm doing this for you. If you want the value that's in it, it's all about you. All right. So Nancy, on behalf of all of this, I just want to say thank you. I'm going to say thank you on behalf of anyone here with our ASL interpreters. I'm just so very grateful that you took the time, to do this survey, and you cared about our audience enough to find out what was on our minds. So thank you on behalf of all of us. And to everyone who joined us today, thanks and have a fantastic day.
Thank you, everybody. It's been a pleasure.